The church smelled like old lilies and cold rain. My husband's coffin sat 10 feet in front of me, but somehow I was the one people kept walking past. My son Oliver stood beside it, shaking hands, thanking guests, acting like he was the one who'd lost a lifetime partner. Chelsea kept whispering to everyone that I was fragile. Her hand pressed gently on my back, like you'd guide a confused patient. Then I heard Oliver laugh, at his father's funeral. A short, relieved laugh he tried to swallow, but didn't quite hide. My name is Ruth Halden. I am 68 years old, and 3 days ago I lost my husband to a sudden heart attack. But what they didn't know was that I hadn't lost everything. Not yet. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from. And hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by family. It helps this story travel farther, and it lets me know I'm not alone. Now, let me take you back to where everything truly began, long before the funeral, long before the lies, long before I realized even my own son was playing a role in something I never could have imagined. I grew up in a world where women like me survived by staying quiet. My mother used to say it every time she braided my hair before school. "Don't cause trouble, Ruthie. Life's already loud enough." That sentence settled into me like a permanent layer of skin, and for the next 60 years, I mistook silence for kindness and endurance for strength. I met Arthur when I was 22 during a winter that felt colder than it should have been. A Midwest cold, the kind that sliced through every layer of wool and made your bones ache. I was shelving books at the public library when he walked in holding a coffee cup with steam curling up like a thin ghost. His voice was warm when he asked where the finance section was. But his eyes, that's what caught me. Gentle, observing, steady, like he could see past people's noise and straight into their true shape. We married 1 year later in a small Methodist church that smelled of lemon oil and hymn books. Money was tight. I taught second grade, and Arthur worked 2 jobs, one as a junior accountant and one loading boxes at a distribution center during night shifts. But we were happy. Really, truly happy. Our house was tiny, barely enough room for Arthur's filing cabinets and my stacks of student papers, but it was ours. When Oliver was born, everything changed. People always say having a child changes your life. They never tell you it also changes the way you view yourself. I became 2 people, the woman who loved her baby more than breath, and the woman terrified she'd never be enough. Oliver was a sweet child at first. Chubby cheeks, loud laugh, always tugging on Arthur's pant leg to come see this. But he grew up fast. Too fast sometimes. By 12, he was already pulling away emotionally, eyeing other people's cars' clothes houses. I tried to bridge the gap, baking him birthday cakes with little footballs, piped in frosting, staying up late to help with school projects. But there was always something restless in him, something hungry. I didn't know it back then, but that hunger would matter later. When Oliver entered high school, the distance only grew. Arthur worked long hours trying to climb the corporate ladder. I took extra tutoring shifts to help pay for school trips and sports fees. Meanwhile, Oliver surrounded himself with kids who bragged about vacations in Florida condos and parents with lake houses. He came home one day, slamming his backpack on the counter. "Why can't we live like normal families?" he demanded. Normal, as if our sacrifices were shameful. I swallowed it, but it carved deeper than I thought. College was when everything shifted. Oliver met Chelsea at a student health fair. She was volunteering for her nursing program. She had that kind of fake, sweet voice, the kind that hides sharpness underneath. Even at the first dinner she attended at our house, she kept saying, "Let me help Mama Ruth," as if we'd known each other for years. I didn't dislike her. I just felt observed, like she was taking notes. I didn't know it then, but Chelsea's observations would become weapons later. Oliver and Chelsea married young at 24 and 21. They started out well enough, she working long shifts at the care facility, he starting in real estate. Arthur and I were proud. We gave them $5,000 for a down payment on an apartment. Oliver didn't even say thank you at first. He asked if we could double it. Chelsea quietly elbowed him under the table, but he still asked. Still, that night Arthur lay in bed staring at the ceiling. "He's changed," he said softly. "He's just stressed," I replied, trying to smooth away the fear. But Arthur had a way of noticing things long before the rest of us. When Oliver started investing in cryptocurrency, Arthur warned him to be careful. Oliver snapped, "You're stuck in the past, Dad. You have no idea what real money looks like." I hated the sting in Arthur's eyes when he heard that. My husband was many things, careful, slow-moving, deeply principled, but he was never small. Still, he bit his tongue, for Oliver's sake. I didn't know it then, but Oliver's resentment would become the crack that everything poured through. A year before Arthur's death, I started noticing little things going missing at home. A bank letter, a property tax notice, once even the keys to our fireproof safe. Chelsea always appeared at the right moment. "Mama Ruth, you probably misplaced it," she'd say with a soft hand on my back. "It happens." Her tone was so sweet it made me feel foolish for even doubting. But every time she walked away, a strange pressure settled in my chest, a question I pushed down. Then came the night Arthur confronted Oliver. I didn't hear the entire conversation, only pieces carried down the hallway. "You can't keep withdrawing money from my account without permission. I'll pay it back. You lied to me. I needed it more than you." I sat on the edge of the bed, frozen, listening to the muffled anger of two men I loved more than anything. Arthur returned to the room with a face that looked 10 years older. "What happened?" I asked. "Just an argument," he said. He didn't elaborate, and I didn't push. A mistake I would regret later. 2 months before the funeral, Arthur started carrying a small notebook everywhere. Black cover elastic band pages lined neatly with dates and times. I thought it was work-related. Audits, deadlines, numbers, his world. But sometimes, I'd find him writing with a tension in his shoulders I didn't recognize. "What are you writing?" I asked one evening as I washed dishes. "Just documenting," he said. Documenting what I almost asked, but I didn't. It was easier not to know. I should have known. At Thanksgiving that year, something happened that still shivers through me when I think about it. We were sitting around the table. Roasted turkey cranberry sauce, the smell of cinnamon and nutmeg filling the room. When Chelsea looked at me and said cheerfully, "Mama Ruth, you told that same story yesterday." I blinked. "I don't think I did." She smiled. "You did? Don't worry, it happens with age." Oliver chimed in. "Yeah, Mom. You forget things all the time now." The table went quiet. Arthur looked at me sharply. "She doesn't forget things all the time," he said firmly. Chelsea shrugged. "I'm just saying, maybe it's time we keep an eye on her memory. Early detection is important." I felt heat rush to my face. Everyone stared at me like I was a broken vase they were afraid to touch. My hands trembled under the table. But the worst part wasn't that they said it. It was that for one small, terrifying moment, I believed them. I didn't know it then, but that moment, me doubting my own mind, was the first step of their plan. I started waking up at night with a strange sense that something wasn't right. Not panic, just a quiet, heavy wrongness in the air. Sometimes I'd walk into the kitchen and find a cabinet open that I was sure I'd closed. Sometimes the thermostat would be set 5 degrees lower than I remembered. Little things, small things, things easy to dismiss. Chelsea always had an explanation. "Mama Ruth, you probably forgot you opened it. You must have changed the temperature and not realized it. You said that yesterday, remember?" I didn't argue, but every explanation felt like a stone added to a growing weight on my chest. One morning, I couldn't find my blood pressure medication. I checked every drawer in the bathroom, every pocket of my cardigan, even the pockets of yesterday's coat. Nothing. When I asked Oliver, he gave me that familiar patronizing sigh. "Mom, you probably misplaced it again. You really need to organize better." Something in me recoiled, again, as if this had been happening for months, as if I'd lost entire pieces of my life. Arthur overheard us and stepped in quietly. "I'll help you look." It took him less than 5 minutes to find the bottle tucked behind a stack of old mail on the kitchen counter, behind the mail I never touched because I couldn't reach that high. Arthur didn't say anything out loud, but when he handed me the bottle, his eyes held a warning. "Something is wrong." I didn't understand what he meant until weeks later. One evening in early December, I found Arthur in his office staring at the black notebook again. He didn't see me standing in the doorway. He was listening to something, an audio clip on his phone. I heard Oliver's voice, first quiet but sharp. "If Dad just signs the papers, we'll be set." Chelsea's voice followed. "Ruth's already slipping. Another month or 2 and she won't be able to argue anything." I leaned against the doorframe, cold blooming through me like frost. Arthur clicked off the recording and closed the notebook quickly when he finally noticed me. "Ruth," he said, too controlled. "I didn't hear you." "Arthur, what was that?" He hesitated only for a second, but after 46 years of marriage, I noticed even the smallest fracture. "Nothing you need to worry about. A lie. A gentle lie, but still a lie." He was trying to protect me, which meant whatever he had discovered was worse than I imagined. I didn't know it then, but that recording would become the backbone of everything that happened next. 2 weeks before his death, the signs intensified. One day I drove to the grocery store only to find the car keys missing again. Chelsea happened to stop by that afternoon and found them almost instantly in her purse. Oh my gosh, Mama, I must have grabbed them by mistake. Her laugh was bright, too bright. Another day I missed a dentist appointment because when I checked my calendar, the date had been changed to the week after. Oliver shrugged. You probably wrote it wrong, Mom. Arthur didn't shrug. He pulled me aside that night. You didn't write it wrong, he said gently. Then who did? He didn't answer, but his silence was louder than any accusation. I didn't know it then, but I was already being prepared for their endgame. The worst moment, the one that finally pierced through the fog of self-doubt, happened 2 days after Christmas. I had just gotten off the phone with my sister June, and I walked into the living room to find Chelsea holding a stack of bank statements. Statements addressed to me. Statements I'd never seen. Oh, Mama, she said in her sugar-sweet voice. These were in the mailbox. I'm just organizing them for you. My stomach tightened. Put them down, I said quietly. She blinked. What? Put them down. For the first time since I'd known her, Chelsea hesitated. She slowly lowered the stack to the coffee table, watching me like she was reading a patient's vital signs. I'm only trying to help, she murmured. My hands were trembling as I picked up the envelopes. 2 were unopened. One looked like it had been opened and resealed. And then I noticed the date on the most recent statement, 3 weeks old. Why didn't I receive this? I asked, voice barely steady. Chelsea smiled. You probably forgot. The word sliced through me. Forgot. That word had become her weapon. A soft bullet she could fire anytime she wanted. That night, long after everyone had gone home, Arthur sat next to me on the couch while the Christmas tree lights blinked behind us. Ruth, he said softly, I need to tell you something, but not tonight. Not yet. I turned to him. Arthur, you're scaring me. He took my hand, his palm warm and steady. I'm trying to protect you. From what? He didn't answer. And that silence, his silence felt like the ground shifting under my feet. I didn't know it then, but Arthur had already met with Henry Caldwell twice. He had already shown him the notebook, the recordings, and the evidence of financial fraud. He had already discussed a plan that required him to disappear, a plan born out of fear that his own son might push him too far, might use his heart condition, his stress, his grief, to solve their problems sooner, as Oliver had been caught saying. 1 week before the funeral, Oliver visited us alone. It was a cold night, wind rattling the windows. Arthur was upstairs resting. Oliver sat across from me, his knee bouncing subtly. Mama, he said, voice soft, almost tender. Have you noticed Dad seems confused lately? More forgetful. I frowned. He seems fine. Oliver nodded slowly, eyes shifting. Well, if something happened to him, I want you to know you can count on me. Chelsea and I would take care of everything. Something cold slipped down my spine. Something like what? Just life? You know, his heart. He shrugged as if he were discussing the weather. We should prepare for the future. That night, Arthur had chest pains. We assumed it was stress. I didn't know until much later that Oliver had insisted on making him a cup of tea. Tea. Arthur said taste it off. Chelsea happened to drop by earlier that day too, claiming she needed to return a dish. She had been alone in the kitchen for several minutes. I didn't know then, but I know now that was the night Arthur realized he was no longer safe. 3 days later, at 5:12 in the morning, I found Arthur collapsed in the garage. I screamed. I called 911. The paramedics rushed in, voices echoing, lights flashing, neighbors waking. Oliver arrived within minutes, too quickly, as if he had been nearby. Chelsea acted devastated, but her eyes kept flicking toward the house, toward Arthur's office upstairs. Everything after that moved like a blurred film reel. The hospital, the announcement, the condolences. The funeral planning done entirely by Oliver and Chelsea, while I sat numbly in the corner. I thought I had lost everything. I thought my husband was gone. I thought my mind was slipping. I didn't know it then, but Arthur wasn't dead. He was hiding, and he was waiting for the right moment to save me. After Arthur's death, the house felt unfamiliar, as if someone had rearranged the air itself. The walls seemed to listen. The floors creaked in new places. Even the silence sounded different, too sharp, too expectant. I tried to settle back into routine, but the routines didn't fit anymore. They slid off me like clothes that weren't mine. The first escalation began quietly. Oliver arrived the morning after the funeral, wearing that solemn expression he put on whenever he wanted something. He stood in the doorway with 2 coffees and an envelope. Mom, we need to discuss the house. My chest tightened. What about it? He stepped inside without waiting for permission. It's too much for you. Chelsea and I think selling now is the smartest move. The market's high. You'd get a good payout. I asked. He didn't blink. Mama, you shouldn't live alone. It's not safe. Safe. The word clawed at me. I'm staying here, I said simply. He smiled thin and pitying. You're grieving. We'll revisit this later. Later came fast. 2 days after that conversation, Chelsea arrived with a casserole dish and a clipboard. Her makeup was soft and sympathetic, her voice even softer. "I made you dinner, Mama Ruth. You haven't been eating well." She walked into the kitchen, set down the food, and placed the clipboard on the counter. "What's that?" I asked. "Just some options for assisted living communities. Lovely places. They offer memory care, too." The word struck like a slap. "Memory care, Chelsea. I don't need." "Mama, please," she interrupted, voice honey sweet. "None of this is your fault. Aging is hard." Aging. As if I were fading before her eyes. The next escalation happened that night. I tried to open a jar of honey and found my hands trembling. Not from weakness, from anger. Their voices echoed in my head. "You probably misplaced it. You said that yesterday. You've been confused. You need supervision." For the first time, the doubt they planted sprouted into rage. The jar cracked under the pressure of my hand. Honey splattered across the counter like amber glass. I stared at the mess and whispered to myself, I am not losing my mind. But the house fought me. Every day brought something new. One morning, the mailbox was empty again, though I could have sworn I'd heard the carrier walk by. I checked the security camera footage Arthur had installed years ago. The camera light blinked, then froze, then went dark. I remembered Oliver fiddling with it during the post-funeral gathering, just cleaning the lens, he'd said. I didn't know it then, but he'd disabled it completely. The next escalation came from Henry Caldwell. I received his call at 7:14 p.m., just as dusk washed the street in blue. "Mrs. Halden," he said, voice low, urgent, "please do not tell Oliver or Chelsea about this call. Someone has been accessing your husband's old accounts." A cold wave ran through me. Who? We don't know yet, but the attempts are coming from within the city. And someone has been asking for copies of his retirement documents. I gripped the phone until my fingers ached. "Henry, what is going on?" "Come to my office tomorrow, alone." The next morning, before I could leave, Oliver showed up unexpectedly. He stood on the porch with that too wide smile he used when lying. "Morning, Mom, just checking in." He looked past me into the house. "Where are you heading?" "Pharmacy," I lied. His eyes narrowed. "You don't need to drive. I can go for you." "I'm fine." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Mom, people are watching you right now. You just lost Dad. You're not thinking clearly." My heart hammered. "Move Oliver." He didn't. Not until I stared him down harder than I had in my entire life. He finally stepped aside and muttered, "You're making things harder than they need to be." Harder for who? The thought twisted inside me. I didn't know it then, but Oliver had been following me for days, parking down the street, watching the house from his car. Later I'd learn he even hired someone to keep an eye on me, someone who wore a black hoodie and lingered near the mailbox at odd hours. But the worst escalation happened that evening. Chelsea arrived again, this time carrying a small bottle of pills. "These will help with your memory lapses," she said. Memory lapses. She tried to hand them to me. I had Dr. Raleigh write a prescription. I froze. I haven't seen a doctor. She hesitated a fraction too long. "Well, he based it on our observations. Our Oliver and Chelsea." I didn't take the pills. I set them on the counter, stared at the label, and felt something inside me harden into steel. After she left, I poured the pills into my hand. Different colors, different shapes. Too many. Not an authorized prescription. Arthur had once told me wrong medication can break a person faster than illness ever could. I finally understood. This wasn't concern. It was construction. A slow, careful construction of the narrative they wanted the world to believe. I was slipping. I was confused. I was incompetent. And they were the benevolent guardians. I stared out the window into the dark street and whispered the truth for the first time. They're trying to erase me. The night after Chelsea handed me the suspicious medication, I placed the bottle on the dining table and stared at it for a long time. The house was too quiet, too still. Even the refrigerator hum felt like a warning. Something in me shifted small, like a door cracking open. I picked up the bottle again, flipped it, and read the pharmacist's label. The instructions were vague. The dosage made no sense for simple memory lapses. And the doctor's name, Raleigh, felt familiar. It took me a moment to remember Chelsea had once mentioned him as a friend from work who doesn't ask too many questions. My stomach turned. The next morning I woke up to find my mailbox empty again. Not a single letter. I stood on the porch and looked toward the street. A man in a dark hoodie leaned against a lamppost, pretending to scroll through his phone. When he noticed me watching, he quickly turned away and walked off. He wasn't a neighbor. He wasn't lost. He was appointed. I shut the door and locked it. Later that afternoon, as I washed dishes, I noticed the kitchen window was cracked open. I never opened that window in winter. A gust of wind pushed in scattering papers across the counter. I bent to pick them up and froze. One of the envelopes was addressed to me, but had been slit open. Not torn, not ripped. Cleanly opened with a letter opener. My hands shook as I held it. Bills, bank updates, insurance notices. Someone wanted access to everything I received. I didn't know it then, but Oliver had been intercepting my mail for months, redirecting half of it to a rented P.O. box. Chelsea picked up the rest. They didn't want me confused. They wanted me uninformed. Around 5 p.m., Chelsea arrived again, always unannounced, always smiling. She stepped inside like she owned the place. "Mama, Ruth, you look exhausted. Did you take the pills?" "No," I said plainly. Her smile flickered. "Mama, you really need to trust us." I watched her carefully. "Why are you so invested in my memory?" She blinked twice. "I care about you." "No," I said. "You care about what happens when the world believes I've lost it." That made her stiffen. For the first time, her voice lost its sweetness. "You're grieving. You're not thinking clearly." I didn't argue. I simply walked to the counter, picked up the bottle of pills, and held it in front of her face. "Do you want to take one?" I asked quietly. Her eyes widened. "That's not—" "What's the dosage, Chelsea? Which pharmacy filled this? What is the diagnosis? Why is the label incomplete? Why is the doctor someone you know personally?" Her throat bobbed. "You're making a big deal out of nothing." "No," I whispered. "You're making me doubt my mind." She grabbed her purse. "I think you need rest." Then she left too fast, too shaken. That night the house felt different again. Not wrong this time charged. Like something inside me had finally snapped into alignment. Oliver showed up the next morning. No knock, no courtesy. He walked straight inside. "Mom, Chelsea said you were refusing your medication." "I don't need it." "Yes, you do." His tone was cold, now cracked with impatience. He sat across from me, elbows digging into his knees. "Mom, we're doing everything we can to protect you. You need help. You're not the same since Dad died." I stayed silent. "You forgot the grocery list last week." "That was because someone changed. You missed your appointment. Because someone changed. You can't keep denying this." His voice boomed through the living room. Something inside me shrank, then strengthened. I looked him dead in the eye. "Oliver, are you trying to declare me incompetent?" His expression froze only for a second, but it was enough. "What? No, why would you even say that?" "Because Chelsea brought me medication from a doctor I've never seen. Because someone is opening my mail. Because someone disabled the security camera. Because someone is watching my house." He opened his mouth, closed it, then stood abruptly. "We're done talking," he said, "but I'll be back later with paperwork. We need to get ahead of this before it gets worse." Before what got worse? My memory or his plan. He left without looking back. The moment the door closed, I sat down on the couch and pressed my shaking hands together. I wasn't imagining things. Arthur hadn't been paranoid. Everything was escalating exactly the way he had feared. I checked the time. My meeting with Henry Caldwell was in 2 hours. I grabbed my purse, put on the coat Arthur had always said made me look strong, and headed out. Strong. At the end of the driveway, that same man in the dark hoodie watched me again. This time I didn't look away. This time I stared straight at him until he turned and disappeared behind the hedges. I started the car, heart-pounding fingers trembling on the wheel. Every shadow on the street felt like a threat. Every car behind me felt like I was being followed. Maybe I was. As I approached the downtown district, my phone buzzed. "Unknown number," I answered carefully. A low voice said, "Mrs. Halden, you should be careful. They're getting desperate." Before I could respond, the call ended. My pulse hammered against my ribs. The city lights blurred through my windshield as I turned into the garage of Prevest Financial. Something was coming. Something big. And I was no longer sure I would make it through without losing more than just my sanity. But one thing had changed finally. I wasn't walking into the dark blind. I was walking into it ready to see the truth. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt like rising into another world. The walls were mirrored to steel, reflecting a version of me I barely recognized, older, thinner eyes sharpened by weeks of fear. When the elevator chimed open, Henry Caldwell was already waiting at the end of the corridor. "Mrs. Halden," he said, holding the door to his office open. "Come in. Quickly." His voice wasn't polite, it was urgent. The office was enormous, floor-to-ceiling windows, polished wood city skyline, stretching behind him like a painting. It smelled of leather and cold air. I sat in the chair opposite his desk, hands shaking, breath uneven. "Henry," I whispered, "please tell me what's going on." "Are Arthur's accounts?" He raised a hand. "Ruth, there's something you need to see, but I must warn you, this will change everything." Before he could say another word, the office door swung open so hard it hit the wall. Oliver stormed in. Chelsea followed close behind, wearing her syrupy smile like armor. "Mama," Oliver said, voice clipped. "What are you doing here?" Henry stepped forward. "Mr. Halden, this is a private meeting." Oliver scoffed. "With my mother, she's not capable of handling matters alone." I stood. "Enough." He froze. Chelsea blinked, startled by the firmness in my voice. "I'm here," I continued, "because I was invited. Alone." "That's not safe," Chelsea murmured. "Given your recent Confusion. That word again. Henry's jaw tightened. Mrs. Halden hasn't shown a single sign of confusion since she arrived. Oliver ignored him. We need to take her home. She hasn't been thinking clearly since Dad died. His voice softened, almost coaxing. Mama, come on. Henry's voice cut through the air. Arthur Halden is not dead. The room fell silent. Chelsea's smile collapsed. Oliver blinked. What? What did you just say? Chelsea whispered. Henry didn't answer with words. He simply pressed a button on his desk. A soft click sounded. A door inside the office opened, and a man stepped out. My breath caught in my throat. Arthur, alive. Standing there with the faint tremble of a man recovering from a heart attack, but alive. His eyes found mine, instantly flooded with apology and relief. Every part of me broke and stitched back together in the same second. I rose on unsteady legs. Arthur, he wrapped his arms around me, holding me the way he always had when storms pounded our roof at night. Warm. Solid. Real. Chelsea staggered backward until her back hit the wall. Oliver went white. Arthur turned toward them, voice low. I didn't die. I hid. Because I realized you two were planning something far worse than stealing money. Oliver's jaw clenched. This is insane. No, Arthur said. What's insane is drugging your mother with mislabeled pills, gaslighting her, intercepting her mail, hiring someone to follow her, and trying to push me into cardiac arrest. Chelsea choked. What? No, we never. Arthur, please listen. But Henry was already opening a thick binder on his desk. Inside were photos, printed emails, screenshots, transaction logs. A USB drive sat on top like a silver bullet. This, Henry said, tapping the binder, is every piece of evidence Arthur gathered over the last year. He turned to Oliver. You forged your father's signature on a preliminary transfer of authority document. You opened 4 credit cards under your mother's name. You tried to withdraw $20,000 from Arthur's retirement account. And you hired someone to monitor your mother's movements. Chelsea's knees buckled. She clutched the edge of the desk. That's not what happened. Henry cut her off. And you, he said, evenly obtained false medical documentation from Dr. Ned Raleigh at Glenview Care, a diagnosis of early dementia. For a woman who passed every cognitive test we conducted last week, Chelsea's head snapped toward me, horrified. You took tests, Arthur answered. Yes, and she passed all of them. I felt something loosen in my chest, something tight and strangling that had lived there for months. I was not losing my mind. I was not confused. I was not fragile. Oliver stepped forward, eyes cold. You can't prove anything. Arthur nodded to Henry. Henry pressed another button. A recording played through hidden speakers. Oliver's voice echoed across the room. Once the dementia diagnosis is in place, she'll have no legal standing. Mom will be out of the house within a month. Chelsea's voice followed, low and sharp. And Arthur, he's stressed. His heart can't handle much more. Sooner or later, it'll take care of itself. I covered my mouth. Arthur's face tightened in pain. Oliver exploded. Those recordings are illegal. Henry didn't flinch. They were obtained by a licensed private investigator after Arthur reported financial coercion. Everything is admissible. Chelsea shook her head frantically. No, I didn't mean, Oliver, tell them we didn't. But he wasn't looking at her. He wasn't looking at anyone. He was staring at the binder, at the evidence, at the life he had built around the belief that our lives, Arthur's life, were stepping stones to his own comfort. You ruined us, he whispered. Arthur's voice was steady. You ruined yourself. Henry walked toward the door. Mr. and Mrs. Halden security is on the way. You can leave voluntarily, or we can escort you. Chelsea broke first. This isn't fair. We were trying to help her. For $12,000, Henry asked coldly. Is that what help looks like? Oliver pointed at me as if I were the cause of his downfall. This is your fault, he hissed. All those years, all that money. And you still wouldn't give us what we deserved. Arthur stepped between us, eyes blazing. You deserve nothing but our love, and you threw it away. For a long moment, no one moved. Then security arrived. 2 men in uniform. They guided Oliver and Chelsea out as they protested, first with outrage, then with begging, then with threats. When the door finally shut, silence washed over the room like warm rain. Arthur turned to me, his eyes soft. I never wanted to hurt you. You didn't, I whispered. You saved me. He cupped my face gently, as if afraid I'd disappear. Not yet. But we're going to finish this. Together. I looked at the binder, the USB, the photos, the evidence of every betrayal. I looked at the man standing next to me. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something fierce and grounding rise in me. Strength. Quiet, sharp strength. We're not done, I said. Arthur nodded. No. But now they can't touch you again. The day after the confrontation, Arthur and I met with Private's attorney, Miriam Beck. Her office smelled of ink and cedar, the kind of room where truth had weight. She spread the evidence across the table like a surgeon preparing instruments. Ruth, she said gently, you are not obligated to pursue any legal action. But I need to tell you what Oliver and Chelsea did is considered elder financial abuse in this state. Multiple felonies. The words should have hurt more. Instead, they landed like validation. I don't want revenge, I murmured. Arthur looked at me. You want safety. I nodded. Yes, for us. Nothing more. But Miriam leaned forward. Sometimes safety requires accountability. She slid the USB toward me. This contains everything. Their transactions, their forged signatures, the audio, the medical fraud, even attempts to alter your husband's retirement accounts. I touched the metal edge cold against my fingers, and the man following me, I asked. We identified him, she replied. He was hired by Oliver under the pretense of checking on his elderly mother. The DA is reviewing it as harassment. Harassment, a polite word for stalking. I exhaled slowly. What happens now? Miriam folded her hands. We will proceed carefully. The goal is not prison unless they push for a fight. The goal is to ensure they can never touch your finances, your home, or your freedom again. Arthur squeezed my hand. We'll let the system handle the punishment this time. This time. A quiet acknowledgement of the darker route Arthur had nearly taken to protect us. We spent the next week giving statements, signing forms, closing old accounts, opening new ones, securing passwords, locking down every inch of our lives. I found myself growing lighter with each step, as if I'd been carrying stones in my pockets for years. Then came the moment I wasn't prepared for. A letter arrived. Not from the bank, not from the DA, from Oliver. The handwriting was shaky, the envelope cheap. Inside was a single page. Mom, I know you probably hate me. You should. I don't have excuses. I only want you to know that everything's falling apart. Chelsea left. I'm out of work. The investigator said charges are coming. I don't want anything from you. I don't know who I am anymore. If you ever decide to talk, I'll be trying to fix what's left of my life. Oliver. I stared at the words until they blurred. Arthur read the letter behind me. He didn't say anything, because there was nothing left to say. That night we sat on the porch of our new rental, the air crisp with early winter. Arthur held my hand as we listened to the quiet, the kind of quiet that comforted rather than threatened. Do you want to help him? Arthur asked softly. I considered it, truly considered it. No, I said finally. Not now. Maybe not ever. Maybe forgiveness isn't owed. Maybe freedom is enough. Arthur nodded. Then that's our answer. We watched headlights pass on the distant road, glowing briefly before fading. I thought the worst part was losing you, I whispered. You never lost me, he said. You just couldn't see the plan yet. I looked at the USB on the porch table silver in the moonlight. The evidence that had freed me. And something more. Miriam had hinted there were connections, financial trails leading beyond Oliver. People who knew what Chelsea and Dr. Raleigh had been doing. People who had exploited other elderly patients. A larger web. A system built on targeting the vulnerable. And suddenly I felt something shift inside me, not anger, not revenge. Clarity. They think they almost destroyed one old woman, I said quietly. But they might have just handed me the one thing I needed. Arthur looked at me. What's that? I lifted the USB. A map. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, subscribe. This story isn't over. And neither are you. What happened to me could happen to anyone who loves too deeply and trusts too easily. But choosing yourself, choosing clarity, choosing peace that is not selfish, it is survival, and it is allowed. If you listened all the way to the end, thank you for staying with me. Your presence means more than you know. Leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. It reminds me how many of us are learning to reclaim our lives piece by piece, day by day. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories of betrayal, truth, and quiet strength, make sure to subscribe before you go. I'll be here ready to share the next chapter whenever you are.